We are learning more about the reality at the border after families decide to send their children here to the U.S. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez followed the Texas Department of Public Safety, who basically is saying that the surge hasn't let up. So Gabe, as you know from covering this pretty extensively, there's not always a lot of access to a story like this. What was your biggest surprise? What's your biggest takeaway?
Well, Mark, we have gone out with the Texas DPS before. What struck me about this visit is that the number, we were here several weeks ago with the same agency, and we went to one of the same spots, and it has not let up at all. In fact, during some parts of the night, there's even more migrants coming. We saw raft after raft after raft filled with mostly women and children that were coming over the border. Now, there are some things that have struck me as well that we have noticed in the last few months. More families now are making an agonizing decision, Mark. They are essentially self-separating on the other side of the border because they know that the Biden administration's policy of allowing unaccompanied migrant children to stay in the U.S., they know that these kids won't be sent back, and their hope is that they might be able to reunite with relatives that are already here in the U.S., and that is contributing to this agonizing decision that these parents are making.
Every single summer, people die, especially when they're crossing desert sections of Mexico, as you know. Last one from me. What's the story on some of the parents who knowingly leave their kids in the U.S.? You mentioned that there's a possibility that there might be U.S. relatives in some cases who could care for them, or sometimes do they think things are so dangerous, so bad back home that they think that the kids are better off in the U.S. without parents in the hands of the system?
One woman we spoke with here, as she got off the boat, she told us that she feared for her life, had gotten threatened by cartels in Guatemala, and that they threatened to kill her and her young daughter. So for her, it wasn't much of a choice at all. However, smugglers are exploiting this. They're exploiting misinformation. They're telling migrants Biden policy shift, even though it allows migrant kids to stay. They're telling these migrants that, look, the borders are being opened, and that's just not the case. In Reynosa, Mexico, again, we spoke with several migrants who asked us, is it true that they would be allowed to come in, that the borders would just be open in a few weeks? And we had to tell them that's not the case, but it's indicative of how these human smugglers are using, are basically spreading misinformation to get these migrants over here. In April, 178,000 migrants were encountered by federal agents here along the border. That's the most in 2 decades.
That's extraordinary. Gabe's report is part of the NBC News series, American Crossroads, coming up next on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. Gabe Gutierrez, thanks very much.